Who is the greatest of all time? It's a question that comes around so often in NBA discussions, whether it's at the middle school lunch table with your friends, all the way up to the highest media outlets in the entire country. And when it comes to the answer to that question, there are two men who stand above the rest in LeBron James and Michael Jordan. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and today we are talking about the volatility of the NBA's GOAT debate. To start off, we should define the term. The GOAT, as an acronym, stands for the greatest of all time. These are the players who aren't just defining players of their generation, aren't a top 10 player for a couple of years. No, they are players whose legacy goes beyond their era, and their impact extends beyond what they did in their time on the court, and extends over to the entirety of the history of basketball, because they have put up a body of work that is almost unrivaled. The 99% of professional athletes will never ever get to reach. Those are the players that are in contention for the greatest of all time. They're not a top 10 player for a couple seasons. They're not a one-time MVP, not a one-time champion. They have continued success that builds up a legacy that almost no one in the history of the sport can reach. That is what we're talking about here when we talk about the greatest of all time. But in defining it, the idea kind of comes about that it can be subjective. Because let's think of, say, the greatest defensive players ever. A guy like Tim Duncan. He's a top 5 player ever, most likely. But he's never in that GOAT debate. And so then you have to, strike the balance of of how highly you value certain attributes like defense as opposed to offense, and all the ways that you can be an offensive leader, whether that's through scoring, whether it's through facilitating, or various other means, and how you can impact the game at the highest level. In its own right, that is very subjective. And that is where really the idea of the volatility of it comes in, and it's a result of that subjectiveness when it comes to truly deciding who is the greatest of all time by defining it. Because the definition can't give you a simple answer. And as a result of that, different people are going to have different criteria and their own opinions and perhaps biases that shape their argument. Before we go into LeBron or Michael Jordan, I think it's best that we look at who came even before them to truly get an idea of the magnitude of this achievement and of this title. And the first man to really be definitively seen as the greatest of all time is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, to add some context in, before this was the Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell era. And both of these guys had very different legacies that made their arguments for the GOAT case not solidified on either end. In terms of a team sport, Bill Russell is the winningest player in NBA history. He won 11 titles in 13 seasons with the Boston Celtics. And if you just look at championships, Bill Russell is without a doubt the GOAT of that era. But his numbers were not as eye-popping as Wilt Chamberlain, who scored 100 points in an NBA game and averaged 50 points in an NBA season. Two feats that have never been replicated and very likely never will. Bill Russell had the team aspect, but Wilt Chamberlain had the individual success to kind of put himself up to par with Bill Russell in spite of having much less championships. And so as a result, there was never really a defined player that you could definitively say was the best ever at that time. And then comes Kareem. And over a 20-year career, which is something in its own right that we don't see very often, athletes playing for such a long time, which will also be something to note later. And in those 20 years, he is a 19-time All-Star, a 2-time NBA scoring champion, 4-time block champion, 6-time NBA champion, 15-time All-NBA team member, 11-time All-Defensive team member, 2-time Finals MVP, and in his rookie season, he was not only Rookie of the Year, but he was third in MVP voting as a rookie. And on top of all that, he sets the NBA scoring record for points in a career. And with that body of work, that is something that still today, most players have never been able to replicate. And so Kareem was really the first definitive answer for greatest of all time. But then comes Michael Jordan. And he goes on to be, by a points per game basis, the greatest scorer in NBA history. And he averages 28 as a rookie when he's just, adjusting to the league. And he goes on to win 6 NBA championships. Now, that is not the same as Bill Russell, who we discussed earlier, who won 11. It's 5 less. But it's the way in which Michael Jordan got it done that really defines his legacy. Because not only was he a lethal scorer, he had perhaps the most iconic dunk of all time. And that dunk has become the logo of the Jordan brand, which is now one of the biggest brands in all of sportswear. So that's iconic in itself. And besides being just perhaps the greatest offensive player ever, or at least up there, and the best scorer ever, so often great offensive players can slack off on the defensive end, but Michael Jordan was a stud defensively too. So he is impacting the game on both ends of the court. And there's truly not a flaw in his game. Of course, he was more shot first oriented. He's going to take his shot first, look for others second. But at the end of the day, that shot is going in most of the time. And his assist numbers were solid in their own right, especially for a shooting guard. So there's not really a flaw in Michael Jordan's on-the-court game. And as stated previously, he goes on to win 6 NBA championships. And the thing that stands out about these is that, one, they both came in three-peats. And that is one of the hardest things to do in all professional sports. In fact, winning 2 championships in a row is very, very hard to do. But winning 3 in a row is even greater. It's something that is only reserved for the very, very best of the best. And so often even those guys won't get there. And they won't be criticized for not three-peating, because that is just an achievement that is rarely ever done. And when it does, it deserves the highest praise possible. But Michael Jordan, he goes and does that twice. All of his 6 NBA championships came in three-peats. And what happened in the middle of those three-peats, you ask? He retired from basketball. He wins 3 NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls, retires, decides to go play baseball, and then he comes back into the NBA and wins another 3 straight championships. It's not just what he's doing on the court, but the fact that he is able to win so frequently and come back, and it looks like he never left, and lead the Bulls to another 3 years of championship runs. And when they went on those championship runs, there was no one that could compete with him, because Michael Jordan went 6-0 in the NBA Finals. If he made it to the finals, he won. Never defeated, 2 three-peats, one regular season. The Chicago Bulls won 72 games, a record that would stand all the way until 2016. Something else to keep in mind. And he set a legacy that didn't have any flaws in it, truthfully. He was undefeated in the NBA Finals, the best scorer, points per game wise at least, in NBA history. And he could back up his offensive prowess on the defensive side of the ball as well. It was really hard to pinpoint a flaw in Michael Jordan's game, and he set the standard for what any future GOAT contenders would have to compete with and compare themselves to. And that is where LeBron James comes in. He is perhaps the most hyped prospect in NBA history. If he did anything less than compete with Michael Jordan for the title of the greatest of all time, his career would have been seen as a major disappointment. He was the chosen one. And not only does he have that attention as a prospect, in the 2003 NBA draft, not only does he go number 1 overall, he goes to his home state team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. So now even more eyes are on him because the most high prospect in NBA history has gone to the team that is located right where he grew up. The team that he grew up watching, he is now getting a chance to play for. And the Cleveland Cavaliers are getting a player who is expected to compete at the highest level from day one. And everything that he does is going to be put under a microscope. And that first stint in Cleveland, LeBron James is much like Michael Jordan, an all-time great scorer. But what sets him apart in terms of his offensive game is the way that he can play make for others. Because as solid a passer as Michael Jordan could be, ultimately he is going to be shot first. And LeBron is too. But he, at the end of the day, is more than willing to make the right play. If there's an open shot, he's going to pass that out, even if that player doesn't go on to make it. And LeBron James, in his first stint with the Cleveland Cavaliers, he puts up great offensive numbers. He's a great defender as well. He's Rookie of the Year. But the one thing missing is postseason success. And that's the biggest knock on LeBron James at this point in his career. By 2009, after another playoff exit for the Cleveland Cavaliers, LeBron James has gone quite a while now without, ever really being a part of a true, proper championship contender. Even if he would take the Cavs to the finals, their roster was just simply outmatched, and LeBron James as one man was not able to lead them to victory. And he decides that, at the end of the day, his legacy, people are going to remember the winners. So he teams up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami to create perhaps the greatest big three in NBA history. And in the introductory press conferences, LeBron James promises many, many titles. Not one, not two, not three, and the list goes on. He is here to win. And that first year in Miami, they don't. They fall to Dirk Nowitzki, who is the antithesis of what LeBron James just did. LeBron left the team that he felt he could not carry to a championship by himself. Dirk Nowitzki leads this Mavericks team by himself for the most part. The supporting cast is somewhat lacking for that Dallas team, and overall it is seen as very much a carry job, and he leads them to victory over the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals. So now, LeBron James couldn't get it done on his own, but he couldn't get it done with a star-studded cast either. And they lost to someone who was able to get it done on their own. Then the Miami Heat go on to win 2 straight NBA championships And it's really par for the course. It's not super noteworthy because this is what was expected out of them. And it's really just seen as kind of a given. It's going to be who's coming in second to the Miami Heat. And LeBron James at this point is kind of like the villain of the league. Because he couldn't get it done on his own, he goes and joins this super team. And they win 2 championships. And he's getting booed when he comes back to Cleveland. And then the following year, the Miami Heat, they bow out in the playoffs. They cannot three-peat like Michael Jordan's Bulls did. And LeBron James decides to come home. He got 2 championships, but now he has a chip on his shoulder to go back to Cleveland and bring them a title. Cleveland, as soon as LeBron was gone, they go out and they draft a very high-level guard in Kyrie Irving. And he is very much coming to his own as a player at this point, and LeBron James is excited to play with him, as well as Kevin Love. And in the 2016 NBA Finals, they are matched up against a 73-9 Golden State Warriors team. Michael Jordan's Bulls a long time ago went 72-10 and won the NBA championship, and that was seen as the greatest season in NBA history for a team. No one had ever won that many games and also won a championship while doing it. They showed up every step of the way in both the regular season and in the playoffs. But the Warriors, they won up the Bulls in terms of regular season wins just by 1 at 73. And they take a commanding 3-1 lead against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But ultimately, they go on to lose. LeBron James and Kyrie Irving as a duo put up historic numbers and lead the Cavs to a 3-1 comeback in the NBA Finals, something that has never happened outside of this time. Never happened before, never happened since. Has a 3-1 lead been blown on the big stage of them all. And LeBron James has just one declaration to make to the Cleveland fans. Cleveland, this is for you. He spent the early part of his career there and could not bring them a title. He went to Miami to become the villain of the league, but win some championships. But ultimately, he comes back to the hometown team, the one that drafted him with their number 1 pick, and he brings them a title against the best regular season team in NBA history. Then you go forward a year, and it's 2018. And this is perhaps one of the best individual seasons of LeBron's career, because by this point, Kyrie's gone, and Kevin Love, as good as he is, isn't quite the number 2 option that he needs to be at this point in his career. And LeBron James carries this Cleveland Cavaliers team all the way to the NBA Finals when they had no right doing so. And he puts up eye-popping numbers in the playoffs. Ultimately, does not lead to the championship. They lose to the Warriors. But this is a very important season in terms of defining the legacy of LeBron James. And after that, he decides, he can't get it done in Cleveland anymore. And he goes to Los Angeles. He joins the Lakers. And a couple years later, they go out, they get Anthony Davis. And the NBA, the entire world actually, kind of shuts down as a result of a worldwide pandemic. But the NBA decides that basketball still needs to go on. And they have the NBA bubble in Orlando. And the Lakers go on to win that, with LeBron James getting his 4th Finals MVP. And this ring is notable because it can often be very, very discredited for the manner in which it was won. Because in the years following this, LeBron and AD have dealt with injuries. And the idea was that the NBA took a little break before continuing on with the NBA bubble. They shut down the season for a little bit. And the idea is that it gave time for LeBron and AD to rest, and that they would not have won the championship without it. But this Lakers team was great in their own right in the regular season. I believe they were the 1 seed. And ultimately, the bubble and atmosphere with no fans is arguably the purest form of hoops because there are no distractions. You're just on the court against five other guys alongside five members of your team, alongside four members of your team at any given time. And in a way, it is arguably the purest form of basketball. But also because of lack of the fan aspect, because of the added rest, it can often be this ring is very discredited. But LeBron James, to this day, while he has not won another championship in Los Angeles, his longevity, we talked about Kareem's earlier, LeBron's longevity has been even greater and something that we will probably never see again. And it is truly, truly unprecedented because he is 39 years old right now. And most players at this point are out of the league or averaging about 7 points a night. But LeBron is still a 20-point per game scorer, one of the best offensive players in the entire league, and his defense isn't the same as it once was. But he's not a traffic cone on that end by any means. So longevity is huge for LeBron, and his finals record stands at 4-6 as we speak. So those are kind of the careers of Michael Jordan and LeBron, and then it comes to the comparison of these two guys. Longevity-wise, it of course goes to LeBron James. The way that he's performed at the age that he is doing it at has never been seen before. And MJ even, had that retirement mid-career, mid-peak really. And that's one of the biggest arguments that is made for LeBron James. It's just the fact that he's still doing this as a 39-year-old, still being, an All-NBA caliber player. But one of the biggest knocks on LeBron, if not the biggest, is that 4-6 record in the NBA Finals. Because yes, he won 4 times, but he also lost 6 times. Meanwhile, Michael Jordan, he won more than LeBron, and he lost less. And then that creates a discussion of, would you rather go to the finals and lose, or not go to the finals at all? With LeBron, of course, having 10 finals appearances, Jordan having 6. What do you value more? 2 more rings, but then the other years you didn't even make the finals? Or 2 less rings, but you're consistently in the NBA championship year after year? And then there's what you value as a player, because Michael Jordan is the greatest scorer in NBA history, but LeBron James is now the all-time leading scorer in NBA history. Nobody has scored more points than he has, while also being a great facilitator and making the right play not just for himself, but others. So how do you value that? And on the defensive end, both of them are great defenders, but LeBron never won a Defensive Player of the Year award. Michael Jordan did. And this is where the volatility of the NBA's GOAT debate begins. Because you can appreciate both players, but people are going to have their biases and their specific set criteria for how they define the greatest of all time. Some value the rings more, a couple more. Some value just making the finals year by year. Some value the longevity. Some value the unmatched peak of Michael Jordan. And people are going to lean the way that they want to lean. And their idea and their opinion is really not going to get altered. So ultimately, is there a proper answer to the question of who the greatest of all time is? No. Because people are always going to be set in their beliefs, and there is not a definitive standard for what you can truly consider a player to be the greatest of all time. You can argue that Michael Jordan set the bar by what he did, having arguably the perfect NBA career. But the thing that makes it more nuanced is that LeBron James, some stuff he did was lesser than Jordan, but he also did some stuff greater than Jordan. So you add in nuance to that as well. And there really can't be an answer. And it comes down to really 1A and 1B. And it's Michael Jordan and it's LeBron James. and you can kind of rank them interchangeably because of the bodies of work that they have had. The biggest testament to their abilities is the fact that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who we talked about earlier, having an absolutely stacked resume and being the definitive GOAT at one time, he is solidly at number 3 for most people because of just the greatness of MJ and LeBron. Not a knock on Kareem, not finding flaws in his game, but just because of what these other two have done. And so there's always going to be debates about the greatest of all time between these two. And there's really never going to be a proper answer because a lot of it is subjective in what you prefer in a player. But the legacies that they created, the bodies of work that they put forward, domination, night in, night out, that's unprecedented. And while we're never going to truly have an answer to the debate, whether you go off statistical production, whether you go off, winning 6 NBA championships, whatever the criteria, there is so much to go over that it is truly difficult and arguably impossible to find a definitive answer. And it's truly ever changing with the opinions on it, and that's how it's become so volatile. While we may never have a definitive answer, the best thing to do is just appreciate these two players for standing well above the rest and being without a doubt the 2 greatest NBA players of all time. Instead of having pointless debates where you're never truly going to change someone's already made up mind, why not just take a step back from the heat of the discussion and appreciate the 2 greatest NBA players of all time? And that is all for today's episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you so much for listening.